From the ninth book in the Left Behind series. The name of this book is Discretion. The Antichrist Takes the Throne. And today I'm reading chapter 13. Rayford felt 20 years younger and wished he were piloting his own chopper. But George was doing fine. Abdullah sat next to him, scanning the sky and the ground with a serious, worried look. Buck sat next to Chaim on the long side bench, his head back, mouth open, sound asleep. You must be exhausted too, Dr. Rosenzweig, Rayford said. For the first time today, yes, and you know I was up most of last night. I heard. God has stood by you, hasn't he? Captain, I confess I am famished. It is as if I have been fueled by the energy of the angels, to whom God gave charge over me. Did you see them, sir? Me? No. But you know Miss Durham saw Michael, the archangel. Rayford nodded. There would be time to tell his own story. Abdullah, he said, and the Jordanian turned. Were there any foodstuffs in what we loaded? He had been heating something over a flameless stove just before they left Miss Ramon. There were, yes, Abdullah was shouting and enunciating. I can hear, Smitty. I've been healed. Really? He leaned back and quit shouting, but still talked loudly enough to be heard above the din of the craft. I have pita bread warm in an insulated box, along with sauce for dipping. You sound like a waiter in a swanky restaurant. How would I know? Chaim leaned in. That sounds like milk and honey to me. Abdullah unbuckled himself and squeezed back between them, kneeling to retrieve the box. He pivoted and opened the lid, revealing a stack of nearly 20 round pitas, about 10 inches in diameter, steam rising. The aroma permeated to a helicopter and woke Buck. Big George even reached back without looking. Rayford slapped a couple of pitas into his open palm. That's what I'm talking about, the pilot said. Though he hadn't said a word for an hour, all dug in, tearing at the chewy bread with their teeth. Lord, you know we are grateful, Chaim said, his mouth full and the others amend. Abdullah was still kneeling by the box when he nudged Rayford and nodded outside. The sky was full of Operation Eagle choppers and GC craft, both fixed wings and whirlybirds. Below, the streets were jammed with fleeing vehicles, careening around corners, bouncing over curbs and torn up streets, pursued by GC vehicles with flashing lights. The others turned to peer out. How are we doing on fuel? Chaim asked. Several hours' worth, George reported. Captain Steele, Chaim said, could we remain in this area and monitor this? Rayford told George to find a friendly altitude, and they hovered in a wide box pattern. A GC chopper moved in behind them at one point and summoned them with all frequency transmission. Civilian chopper, you are advised to leave Israel airspace immediately. Captain, George said, what frequency can they hear me on? Rayford told him and asked what he had in mind. I just think I should be courteous, don't you? Don't antagonize them. Everybody in the chopper laughed at that, and Rayford realized how absurd it was. The GC couldn't be any more antagonized. George switched to the frequency Rayford suggested. GC chopper, this is civilian bird. Over which part of your populated city did you plan to send our flaming wreckage? Civilian, you are violating a curfew established by Potent Carpathia himself. I don't recognize the authority. Repeat, Carpathia, His Excellency himself. I recognize the name, GC, I repeat. I don't recognize the authority. Abdullah's eyes were alive. You Americans are crazy brave. The radio crackled again, but authority of the global community and its risen Potent and Lord, His Excellency Nikolai Carpathia, you are commanded to land at once in the first available area and surrender yourself, your passengers, your cargo, and your craft. No thanks, George said. That is not a request, civilian. That is an order sanctioned by the President. Sorry, GC, but we're on a mission from the real risen Lord, and we have both human and edible cargo. We don't wish to surrender. Repeat, the part about the people or the pita bread. Be forewarned, civilian chopper. We are fully armed and prepared to destroy your craft if you do not comply immediately. Right now? Affirmative. Just a minute. You request time to comply? No, I just need a minute. You have 60 seconds. I can't have a minute? 55 seconds, civilian. Let me make sure I get over the busiest streets here, GC, in case I'm not as invulnerable as I think I am. Coming up on 45 seconds. Put that chopper down. We're eating and we have no airsick bags. If we have to use evasive measures, we could make a mess. Final warning, 30 seconds. We won't be hearing from you again then? Negative. Not at all? Correct. Not one word. 20 seconds. That's 2 words. Rayford had to wonder if George was as scared as he was. The big man obviously believed they were safe because Shane was aboard, and Rayford had more than enough reason to trust God. But when he saw the GC chopper back off to where a missile explosion would not damage the shooting craft, he believed they were about to be fired upon. Buckle in, Smitty, he shouted. Abdullah leaped into his seat while Rayford secured the food box. Buck looked as focused as Rayford, but Chaim seemed bemused. We belong to God, the old man said. His will be done. Mac hadn't had this much fun since he was a school kid, and his pet snake found his sister's room. He bounced along Jerusalem streets with a truckload of Israeli believers and 2 nurses from America. The scene reminded him of Keystone Cops. Operation Eagle drivers simply would not be stopped. They swung around barricades, over boulders, through earthquake residue, and past GC peacekeeper vehicles. Back in Texas, when Mac was a kid, you could drive a farm vehicle at 12. By the 6th grade, he was driving tractors and combines, pickups and dump trucks, and now he had drawn a new personnel transport from France, driven in by an international commodity co-op volunteer who had ridden back to get another. This was a funny rig with power and the ability to be driven in automatic or manual. The former would come in handy on the open road once they got south of the city, but in the chaos in which he now found himself, Mac enjoyed the 6-speed stick. Even more, he was entertained, though, that seemed too light a word for it under the circumstances. But the spectacle of the freshly healed GC personnel thumbing their noses at the Mike and Nikolai agreement and trying to get in the way of the exodus of 1 million people. Nearly all the Operation Eagle vehicles were 4-wheel drive and could pick their way around any obstacle. When the road filled with stopped cars and trucks, those in the back just swung out and around and made their own routes and paths. GC peacekeepers and morale monitors, the former in uniform, the latter wearing their badges in bright orange sashes, tried to direct traffic, stop civilian cars, check papers, and inform everyone they were violating the martial law curfew. They were ignored, and Mac wondered how God was doing it. He saw a lot of weapons but heard little gunfire. No one allowed himself to be pulled over, and when GC vehicles blocked the path of a civilian car or truck, the latter just backed up and went around. Mac wondered why the GC didn't shoot or ram these vehicles, but he figured he'd learn when he was singled out. For now, Leah was asking an Israeli in the passenger seat if she could switch places with him so she could talk to Mac. We gonna make it? She asked. He shot her a glance. She was pale and her eyes darted about the scene around them. Looks like it, he said. You see any of ours who are not making it? She shook her head and fastened her seatbelt, then sat with her hands balled into fists into her lap. Mr. McCollum, Hannah is wondering why we're going to Petra. She and I mean. Obviously, there's no need for medical personnel there, and neither of us is an Israeli. Me either, Max said. Obviously, we're taking these people to their new home. Chloe's got shipments of building material and such that will need to be processed. Maybe you can help coordinate that while we're getting the last of the refugees delivered. That's going to take a while. Okay, that a problem? No, it's just that you're not going to tell me it's not what you signed up for. I mean, we all do what we got to. No, I know it's fine. It's just that being at Petra is going to be real hard on Hannah with what happened. I was there. So you see, have her join me up here, would ya? She can hardly talk, Mr. McCollum. I don't need her to talk. I need her to listen. Rayford leaned as far to his right as he could and kept an eye on the GC chopper behind them. They apparently cared not a whit about who or what was below. Everybody secure, he said. Prepare for incoming. The pursuing craft was directly in line with them in a can't-miss situation. Rayford considered barking evasive maneuvers at George, but it would be futile. The GC flew a smaller, more agile bird. Even if George eluded the first fusillade, it would be only a minute of time. They're firing, Rayford hollered, and buried his face between his knees. He had seen the orange bursts and the white tracers and expected the instantaneous ravaging of metal and plexiglass and fuel tanks, the gush of cold air, the ball of flame, and the free fall. He felt the blazing, screaming bullet tips shoot past between him and Buck and Chaim, and the white-hot streaks made him look up. The ammunition flashed through the bird, and the force of the air pushed George's head to the left and Abdullah's to the right, as both involuntarily ducked and covered their ears. But there had been no damage to the back or front of the chopper. Rayford stared as the shots found the tail rotors of a GC craft ahead of them and sent it spinning to the ground. He shuddered and realized he was gripping the seat so tightly his fingers had locked into position. Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? Be of good cheer. Do not be afraid. Rayford turned slowly to see Michael next to him again. You all see him this time, don't you? He said. We saw him, Chaim said. Praise God. I heard him, Abdullah said, turning. But again, Michael was already gone. Max saw the flashing lights in his side rear view mirrors. You're not going to stop, are you? Hannah asked quietly. Take more than that to stop me now. The GC behind him started in on their PA system. I don't want to talk to them, he said. I want to talk to you. Did you lose a loved one today? Of course, didn't you? Yes, I did. Then you should understand. That's why I don't, Hannah. I'm not saying this is easy. But did you see David fold up and hibernate when he lost his fiancée? No, ma'am. I know you and David were close, but what do you think he'd want? Do I have to remind you that Rayford lost 2 wives and a son? That Tyson lost his whole family? I'm not discounting it, and I'm not saying you don't have a reason for wanting to stay away from Petra, but David was my boss and my friend, and this is no picnic for me either. I know. We're all going to need some grieving time, and we won't likely get it until we head back to the States. Meanwhile, we need you, Hannah. We don't have the luxury of grieving the way we used to. Too many people counting on us. Now, there may be nothing for you and Leah to do inside Petra, but you know well, as I do, that none of us helpers are guaranteed safety. Who knows what kind of walking wounded we might have showing up to drop people off. She nodded. Mac, you better pull over. Ma'am? She pointed past him on his window. A guard hung out the passenger side of a GC vehicle with a submachine gun pointed at Mac. Well, George said, that was just about the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Do we keep testing our luck or do we get on to Petra? If you think that was luck, Rayford said, maybe just an expression, Cap. I know good and well what it was. Let's stay here and watch, Abdullah said, craning his neck to see the chopper that had fired on them. No need to be in the middle of everything, Rayford said. Get someplace where we can observe without unduly drawing more fire. Chang phoned Tyson early in the afternoon, Chicago time, and walked him through how to broadcast live over international television from right where he was. Is your monitor somewhere that you can stand behind it and survey the room? Yes. Have someone sit where you're going to sit and see what you can see past them. Anything that would be a clue to your whereabouts, get rid of it. Tyson asked Ming to sit in his chair at the keyboard, and he squeezed between the back of the monitor and the wall. On the opposite wall, a clock would give away what time zone they were in. Chang, Tyson said, let me get rid of the clock, and then the background will be a blank wall. Good. And then can you tell me how long your message? Wait, sir, go ahead. Why not just change the clock to Carpathian time and let people wonder where you are? Interesting. Ming broke in. Won't they see it as an obvious trick, Chang? They might if we made it prominent, he said. Put it in the corner of the shot, and I'll make sure it's out of focus. People will think they have discovered something unintended. My message will be short, Chang, Tyson said, just enough to encourage the believers before you transmit Chang's salvation message audio. Excuse me, Dr. Benjuda, but I'm getting something on my Phoenix 216 bug. Stand by. You go and get back to me later. Mac held up a finger to the GC as if requesting a moment before he pulled over. He had speed dialed Rayford. Permission to fire upon the GC before they shoot out our tires. Denied, Mac. Just elude. Let God work. He can work through your 9mm, can't he? You still have that? Sorry. Just don't stop, Rayford said. Even with a flat, call back if they flatten your tire. Mac stopped in the middle of the road with the GC next to him, but he refused to roll down his window. The GC pulled in front of Mac. When the passenger got out, Mac backed up and pulled around the vehicle, and the pursuit began again. When the GC got close, Mac slammed on the brakes. Sorry, friends, he yelled. Should have told you all to buckle up. The GC stopped within inches of Mac's bumper, and they both jumped out, shouting and waving weapons. Mac took off again, and as soon as they jumped back in and accelerated, he swung left, popped a U-turn, and swung in behind them. Apparently, Carpathia still suspected the Kensett building and thought his own plane was most secure. Chang followed an indication on the odometer from the patch to the bugs there, and sure enough, it sounded as if workers were setting up for yet another meeting in the first-class cabin. A couple of stewards were speaking in an Indian dialect, so Chang quickly fed it through a filter David had recommended, and an immediate interpretation came up as captions. They will not destroy the rebel airstrip, then. It appears the GC will use it for its own purposes. They will take out the buildings and clear it of the enemy, of course, but then they will fly in their own troops, who will be trucked to Petra to head off the fleeing insurgents. They will try to they are coming. Mr. Akbar, sir? Akbar, sir? Pakistani? No apologies, Director. Speak English. Yes, English. This will be a small gathering, just the potent, Reverend Fortunato, Mr. Moon, Miss Evans, and myself. Oh, thank you, sir. We had already made room for too many, had we not? No problem. You know what everybody likes. Have it out and available, and don't forget Miss Evans' fondness for ice. 1,000 thank yous for reminding me, sir. More ice, please, she says constantly. Water for you and Mr. Moon, juice for Mr. Fortunato and Reverend Fortunato. Oh, yes, humble apologies. I do not care, but you do not want to make that mistake in front of His Excellency or the Most High Reverend Father. Chang heard Suhail Akbar chuckle. Make yourself scarce once everything is in place. Chang formatted the program to record and then switch back to Chicago. Ready, he said. I am, Tyson said. How do I look? Scared. I do not wish to look scared. Can't help you there, Doctor. We're pirating the only show in town all over the world. If anyone is watching TV, listening to radio, or surfing the net, you're what they're going to get. That sets my mind at ease. Just trying to explain your nerves, sir. Say when. Now. I am on, Tyson said. Seriously. But Chang didn't dare answer for fear of his voice being traced. He held his breath, grateful Tyson had not used his name. Greetings, Tyson said. It is a privilege for me to address the world through the miracle of technology. But as I am an unwelcome guest here, forgive me for being brief, and please lend me your attention. Chang checked in on the Phoenix. It sounded as if everyone was there and settling in. Commander Moon, get someone to turn off that television. Wait, who is that? You know who that is, Excellency, Leon said. That's the heretic Tyson Ben Judah. More than a heretic, Carpathia said. He is behind this Micah, thus the plagues of sores. So now he consolidates the Orthodox Jews with him? How did he get a television network? That is GCNN, Postant. Well, get him off of there, Carpathia raged. Walter! The TV in the Phoenix went silent, and Carpathia exploded. I mean, get him off the air, you imbecile. Call whom you have to call. Do what you have to do. We have overcome the plagues, and now we will look like buffoons, allowing the enemy on our own network. Moon was on the phone, his voice shaky, sounding to Chang as if he feared Carpathia would put him to death if Tyson was aired a minute longer. Moon swore and demanded to be put through to the head of broadcasting. No excuses, he cried. Pull the plug, now. Give me that phone, Carpathia said. Cut the feed, cut the signal. It sounded as if the phone was flung across the cabin. Turn it on, let me see. Moon, I'm sure they've at least gone to black. Excellent. Turn it on. Act. Still there. What is it with you people? Suhail, come here. Right here. Excellency. No restrictions on curfew enforcements. Carpathia spoke so quickly that his words ran together, and Chang had to strain to understand. Shoot to kill at the Mount of Olives at Masada on those locations have been cleared. Do not interrupt, Suhail. Every civilian plane destroyed, and we have suffered casualties on the ground from crashing planes, sir. Do you hear me? Do you understand what I am saying? Do I need to have you executed the way I will execute Walter if this Ben Judah is not off the air when again I look at the screen? Moon wailed. What more do I do, Excellency? You can die. No, Suhail, a weapon. Please, sir. No, Suhail. Scuffling, blam, a scream. Hold out your other hand, Walter. Please. Blam, more screaming. More shots. Fresh cries with each, the banging of shoes against seats and tables as Moon Chang assumed. Frantically tried to crawl to safety. More rapid shots in succession, wailing like a terrified baby, finally a last shot in silence. You're doing the right thing, Nikolai, Viv Evans said. You should kill them all and start over. Thank you, Viv. Fortunato, I worship you, risen master. Shut up, Leon. Suhail put a fresh clip in this. Sounds of the snapping in of more ammunition. Fortunato, I bow in respectful silence to your glory. Oh, for the privilege of kissing your ring. Now give it to me, Suhail. As you wish, Excellency, but I will execute anyone you wish. I have always carried out your directives. Then do what I say. Anything, Postant. I want dead insurrectionists. Run them down, crash their vehicles, blow their heads off. As for Petra, wait until we know for certain Micah is there, then level it. Do we have what we need to do that? We do, sir. In the meantime, someone, anyone, get Ben Judah off the air. I will pray him off, your worship, Fortunato said. I will kill you if you do not shut up. Quieting now, Highness. Oh, what? The water, the ice. Chang jumped up and turned on the faucet over his sink. Blood. And that is the end of chapter 13. Next, I'll be reading chapter 14. And thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day.